Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, doing more live podcasts because we have this beautiful studio. I'm actually in my wife's studio right now, but I'm going to be doing more of these. And my guest today is Myesha Reynolds from Equity Lens Consultants. And what I'm trying to do is just have more conversations. That's why I started this podcast in the first place, to have kind of difficult conversations. So I can actually talk to you like this instead of looking to a screen.
Yeah.
Really nice to finally meet you in person. We did an Instagram Live together. Can you just explain to me and the audience a little bit about what you do? Because I have been on social media for a long time, being very critical of the concept of equity. And in high school, especially the diversity, equity, inclusion departments. And when I saw even just the name of your company, I was like, uh-oh, here we go. And I said, you know what? I want to learn more because I've reached out to a bunch of diversity, equity, inclusion consultants to say, hey, let's have a conversation like you and I are going to have. And I get shot down over and over and over again. Then a mutual friend of ours, introduced me to you, and I was like, all right, well, I'll take a shot. And then we started talking. I was like, oh, okay. Maybe that's why you're willing to talk, because you're open to different ideas and things like that. So thank you. This is going to be fun. Just have this kind of conversation, kind of dive into what you do and how we can kind of promote more of it. So maybe introductions and tell us a little about what you're doing.
Definitely. So thank you so much too, because I feel like I get so much resistance with the message and the kind of teachings I do, my perspective on equity, because most of what I see out there now is to me fundamentally wrong, And so for me, when I used to be a teacher, I spent many years in elementary education, and I remember just noticing some disparities in achievement and just wanting to find out why. And in particular, I spent 10 years in the inner city of Milwaukee public schools and loved teaching. It was so challenging, so rewarding.
Yeah.
Then I moved because I kept getting shuffled around. I thought, I'm going to try something else. After 10 years, I went and worked in a suburban school district that was known as a high performance school district. So I was actually pretty proud to not work there. When I started working there, I noticed right away, maybe within days of teaching, that I was teaching fifth grade. These students came to this, when they would come to the school, you wouldn't leave. So you would come in kindergarten and stay through fifth grade. So to me, that should have meant that kids had similar levels of achievement, could do similar types of work and perform very similarly. So I thought, and then I started noticing that wasn't the case. And then when I noticed those things, I was like, okay, well, let me think about the different children that this is, just to kind of make sense of the disparity.
Yeah.
And I found that there were some students of lower socioeconomic status or students of color were not performing as well. And so I didn't immediately think oh, these teachers aren't doing a good job or people are racist or anything like that. I just thought, what do we need to do differently so that all of our students can graduate performing at or above grade level? Because the data showed that after graduating high school, only 14% of students of color were proficient in math, and then maybe 20-some% in reading. I was like, this is alarming because I know they all have the ability. And so I started just kind of asking questions, serving on different committees, curriculum committees, diversity committees, and having conversations. And I found from that the perspective sometimes of people, the way they thought about different children, interacted with different children, was to me some of the reason to the disparity or the cost. And so I just went to the superintendent and said, hey, I really want to do something about this problem. I feel like there's some inequities that are in place, and I want to help be a part of the solution. And that's kind of how I started in equity work. And my lens and perspective was always it's all about all kids, and it doesn't matter what they look like. We just need to do what's right and fair for all of them. What I was starting to realize, though, is that what other people saw as equitable or right and fair was different than me.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh, wait, I don't mean that. I don't mean what you think I mean. And I think and that was kind of the beginning of where I felt like equity started to take on a mind of its own and a different path than what I, growing up or just, as an adult thought equity was. I just thought it was equality of being fair and impartial. And so thinking about what you do and your lessons and your interactions and all of that, whether or not you're fair and doing what's right to those people in front.
Yeah. So you're talking about the achievement gap, essentially, which we see, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've seen that because I've taught at schools that were 0% white, and then schools that are like predominantly white, and then schools that were like poor, taught in a really poor area of East LA, and then like, now I'm at like a rich private school. It's like religious private school, Beverly Hills adjacent. Kids have kids problems all the time, and they're all riddled with anxiety and stuff like that. But what I've found is like there is real genius everywhere. There are kids who get into great schools because their grandfather donated a library or something like that at this private school, but they're just like the horsepower of their brain is not super high, but they're going to have this like blazed, this paved pathway up to the top. And these other kids who might have been like just selling weed or something like that, but they were like super geniuses. And I got some of them to like actually try on a standardized test and like, just give it a shot this one time. And then they had like crazy high test scores to the point where the administration was like, no, they cheated. They absolutely cheated. There's no way. It's like, it's such a, the way I see it is it's like a waste. There's untapped genius in all of these pockets around the country that the same universities just, it's like drilling for oil in the same spot over and over and over again and not finding out like, where are these people who should be running these institutions and rising up and being in these universities? They're not even interested in tapping into them because I guess that's what you're aiming at. Like, what is it that's preventing them? Like, what kind of things are stopping these kids from getting what they need to do to have an even playing field so that they can compete on even ground? You know what I'm saying, Myesha? Like, it's weird because I will go out of my way to give my own children an unfair advantage. My kids, I'm not be like, all right, anything I can do to give you a bump, I'll do it. And I think everyone thinks like that. And if those kids don't have someone advocating or having the resources to give them whatever that bump is, it's not an even playing field. And it's not a fair fight, so to speak, to get to these positions.
Yeah, what I think about that is in this particular school district that I'm talking about, I felt like when I came in, I thought this is like the kind of school that I feel like all kids should go to. Like every kid could sign up and play an instrument and have instrument lessons. There were all kinds of sports and activities. And then they had high caliber teachers as well as great neighborhoods, where kids can, just really be a part of their community. And then other like performances and other things that they could get involved with. So I felt like this is like the cream of the crop school district. And it was a little diverse. So to me, I felt like looking at all those factors, I was like, there's no reason why like students should be achieving here because it's more balanced than what I had seen. Like I've been in Milwaukee public schools where kids didn't have PE and kids didn't have, instruments. Like only some schools have that. Well, this district, it was very, they just had a lot. And so I think that's why I started to say, so then what is the issue? And I found that some of it was the mindsets that people had about certain children. So I would often hear like, if I say, oh, what do you think is going on with the student? Oh, their parents don't really care about education. What makes you think that? They never come to parents' conferences or they never respond to my email. Exactly. Yeah. And so I would say, like, so your mindset, and I would watch this as a coach because I was teaching, but eventually I became a math coach and then an equity coach. But so I would watch the interactions. I would see that sometimes there wasn't as much effort put into that because of the mindset and the idea that you already had about this child's family and that they're not really caring, don't care too much about their learning. But the kids who you felt like their parents did and were pretty invested, and you were a little more invested. Right. Yeah, and so to me, I was like, we need to have a mindset shift. So oftentimes when I would prepare professional development presentations, it was always to help with that mindset shift that needed to happen for teachers to kind of have this awareness, this aha. I would always start off with like reflecting and thinking about like, what do you even think equity is? Or like, what are your strengths in teaching? And what are some things that you know that you personally want to work on just to really get people processing and thinking and then leading them on a journey to think differently about students because I felt like that was so much more impactful than giving them like, oh, try this strategy, do this, do that. Like they can have a toolkit full of tools, but I just felt like if the mindset wasn't right about the child that is right in front of them, then that child right in front of them would never have the ability, even with all of these resources, to be and excel the way in which they could.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do you think that the teachers and the administrators that were framing it that way, did they divide it along racial lines typically, or was it like socioeconomic lines? Like there was a poor white kid from like the trailer park or whatever, that kind of situation. Like, were they kind of viewed as the same as like a poor black kid or something like that? Or was it more along racial lines?
Yeah, I felt like when we looked at the data, it was clear that it was, racially, like that, those were the kids who were not performing as well. However, in interaction and things, no, I think it was just kids of lower
Yeah.
socioeconomic status sometimes, but sometimes it was higher, but the thought and the perception that the teacher may have had about the family, whether or not they kind of liked their interactions with the family, could gauge how they would respond and teach
Yeah.
in class. The fortunate thing for those students who came from middle class families or families who were educated is they had a resource at home. So where the teacher wasn't kind of like helping to close that gap or meet those needs, they had the support at home, whereas other kids might not have had that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I've seen that a lot. Like how much support you have at home. That transcends a lot of things. Like, do you have people in the home that are even like literate, like
mhm,
read to you, that talk to you, that give you some sort of guidance and morals and stuff like that? A
yeah,
lot of kids that don't, they're just going to be behind the eight ball. What's your background? Like, where did you grow up? Like, what kind of environment, stuff like that?
yeah. So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to public school, like just like elementary school across the street from my house, and
Yeah,
I was bused into a brand new middle school, and then I advocated for myself to get into a high school that was college prep. And I say advocated for because I have a twin sister, and she was placed
identical twin.
fraternal.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Because
That's funny.
And so yeah, and so I remember getting the letter because you had to apply for your,
Mm,
different schools, and we picked three. And I got the third choice, which is the school across the street, but it was like not a good school.
mm.
And I remember looking through all the resources and trying to figure out how can I get into like the school magazine or pamphlet or whatever, just trying to find out like how could I get into the school that my sister was accepted into because I really wanted to go to that school.
Mm.
And then because I knew I had a goal of going to college, and this was a university prep school, it was one of the specialty schools. And so I called there and pretended to be my mom. But I didn't actually grow up with my mom. I was actually in foster care. So I was born to a teenage mom, and I was with her. My sister and I were both with her. My sister till she was 18 months, and then me until I was about 6. A cousin of ours who did not have her own children, she would help my mom with us. And so my mom then, by the time we were 18 months, had another baby. So twins and then this little boy. And so my cousin took my sister in. And then some years later, after me kind of still being with my mom and kind of bounced from like house to house and
Oh, you were split up from your twin sister.
but
Oh,
they did a good job of still I would
yeah.
go and visit her, she
Okay.
would come to me, or we were in school together. But then my mom said she really wanted something best for me. And so my cousin was able to take me in through like foster care. And so that was a whole interesting experience because like the state is so involved in your life
Yeah.
and ways at that point. So my cousin then, it was totally a blessing that she was able to take me. I didn't understand it then, but like as an adult, I'm like, okay, the best thing that could have happened to me. But she always said, like, I really know that you're gonna go to college. And so I remember calling and advocating for myself. I really want to get into school, and I pretended to be her. And they called her back and said, "Thank you for calling. We're going to be able to put because I found there was like a sibling preference
Yeah.
where they could have put her in the school I was in or me in the school she was in." And they called home, and I was working a job because I worked since I was like 12. And she called me at the job. She's like, "Do not ever call your school and pretend to be me." And I was like, "What?" Because I had no idea. Like I didn't put the piece together. And so and so I went there. So I was there, and then I stayed there for college. Went to an all girls college for my bachelor's degree, which I love because the education there was focused on pass or fail, which I felt like I had to work so hard for. Because if I turned in an assignment and it wasn't like done really well, the teacher gave so much feedback on all the good things and then all the things that need to be worked on. Everything we had a rubric for everything, criteria. I'm so about that style of like teaching and learning because they always said it's not just about us giving you an A, B, C, or D. It's about are you attaining and retaining like what you're learning? Are you able to
Yeah.
put that in
And a lot of
practice?
structure for the students. Like,
Mhm.
so it's a lot of feedback, constant feedback, which allows you to then fail a little bit because like you're failing your way to success, which is the way it works in real life. And I see that in schools nowadays. Kids are so terrified of failure because their GPA.
Yep.
So if they get an A minus, that marks their GPA down a little bit, and they're not going to get into their dream school, and it just becomes this thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So giving that constant feedback sounds like the ideal situation.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of another style of learning. So when I went back to my master's, I was, well, where else am I going to go? Because I learned to be a reflective practitioner through that because even when I would teach a lesson, like immediately after I was done, I was like, okay, what did I do well and what do I need to improve? But I learned that from my education. And so I felt like that school made me such a well-rounded teacher. And I hated giving grades. Like, I hated it because I was like, what does this mean? Like, to you as
Yeah,
a child,
yeah, yeah,
I want you to understand that even if you were a C student or did something that was like a C average paper, but you made improvements and you worked your way to an A, for you to feel proud of yourself and not just feel as though like you're not as good as your peers.
yeah.
So that's kind of how I grew up. And then I moved here. I taught in Wisconsin and moved to California just in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now you've kind of devoted your life to consulting about equity. And is this with businesses, schools, all of the above?
Yes. Businesses, nonprofits, churches. Yeah, to talk about equity.
Okay. Because I was in a conversation with Jonathan Haidt, who I really love, social scientist, does like The Righteous Mind, great book and stuff like that. He talks about a lot of the dangers of, I use like it's kind of like a pejorative or whatever of like wokeness, but we kind of know what we mean by that. It would be like the virtue signaling elements of like critical social justice stuff. And there's elements of it that I think are really damaging. I think that there's also a lot of people that mean well, but don't really know kind of what they're doing. And when I was talking to him, and he said, you know what, I think it's kind of hit its peak kind of crazy, and it's going to kind of go down a little bit now. I said, well, here's the thing. What I'm seeing within schools is they've all brought in these DEI departments, and they brought in a DEI budget to bring in consultants to do all kinds of intrinsic bias stuff and talk about. I just saw something today that LAUSD is promoting this stuff about like food decolonization, and about how all food is good food as long as it's not like spoiled, because to say that one food is more healthy than another food is like bigoted and rooted in oppression. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you have to be kidding me. Like, telling children that what they eat doesn't matter. They showed this like video to LAUSD, like, don't eat those donuts. Why? Are they spoiled? No. Oh, you think we shouldn't eat donuts because you've been brainwashed into thinking that they're bad for you. And it's like, you look at things in like marginalized communities across racial lines, but even in like the Black community, like diet is a really important element of like getting stuff. I mean, Tupac, change the way we eat, change the way, like, and I see this, but now that there's money there for DEI, and there's consultants and stuff like that, there's opportunity. I hear it often. I might have said this in our live, but a lot of people, I've heard it say, like, they bring in the cockroaches to be the exterminators. So the people to highlight, how to get rid of bad inequities and stuff like that are just going to make it worse. But you are doing something different. You're doing something different, but you and your company can fit within that criteria, because what you're doing is fitting the criteria, and they could bring you in and actually make positive changes. Yeah. I was been familiar with like Chloe Valderi, Irshad Manji I've worked with a little bit. They kind of are doing similar things about like a different approach to talking about race and talking about inequities and inequality and stuff like that. So that's why I wanted to have this longer conversation with you, is to give you a platform to talk about exactly like the kind of things that you do, because I think there's a lot of companies and a lot of schools that are like, we got to check this box. It's just checking a box. Let's check a box. And a lot of people sit around and roll their eyes, do that thing where they ask you all kinds of questions, you click different boxes, they say like, you associate these people with, gunpowder or something weird. That's like, no, like, what are you talking about? It just doesn't fit. So what would you say, like, is the common way that things are being done? Maybe my perception's wrong. I don't know. It's just like, I'm in a little box, but like, what is commonly being done, and how is what you do different?
Yeah. One of the things I remember is when I started my equity business, I started kind of just researching like what is out there and what are people, saying about equity. When you look at a consulting company.
Sorry, there's a fly in there. Can I have one of those like zappers? That's not fair.
So I started to just kind of see what other people are doing. And I noticed that most companies are talking about equity in the same way. And I think part of the reason for that, my thoughts, are whoever people see as like the gurus or the ones behind the movement or the know-it-alls, the ones who are, you know, educated and the voice. It's like people just take from them, like whatever they say, I will implement into my equity
Yeah.
trainings and my equity curriculum. And it's very different than for my approach because to me, I think I go in with like, yeah, all people should be treated fairly. And I get pushback because people say, well, white people have always been treated fairly and
Yeah.
people of color haven't. Now it's art. Now it's people, you know, time for people of color to be treated fairly. And I said, so at the expense of other people not? Like, was it fair then if people of color weren't treated fair back then? Was that okay? No. So then why would we, you know, say now it's okay to treat white people
So
fairly?
this is like the Ibram Kendi idea of the only
Yes.
remedy to past discrimination is current discrimination. It's
Yes.
like this group has had such a head start that we have to almost like shackle them down a little bit to get even. And once we're even, then maybe we could do something. Like, is that like kind of the thinking, I guess?
It is. You know, when I talk to people, sometimes reach out to me for trainings and say, "Hey, like I heard you on like sometimes I do like workshops or free workshops for or interviews with other like companies and
Mhm.
like last night I did a webinar for a ladies group and so sometimes people will see me and hear me and then they'll email me and say, you know, this is really refreshing because for my job they brought in, you know, DEI coaches or consultants or people to do trainings and their message is so targeted, you know, at certain people and it's so filled with hate where they can't even receive anything that is being said because they feel awful. And I'm just like, where are we ever, how are you ever going to get anywhere making people feel shameful or who they are, the way they were created? Like, you can't do anything about that. I think the idea of making everybody think that they are racist, you know, and if with this whole like anti-racism like being pushed, I'm like, well, why would we make an assumption that a person is racist? Like you wouldn't make an assumption that a person is a murderer until they
Yeah.
committed a murder. You know, so it's like, why then would you just think that we need to teach kids how to be anti-racist when if we just raise our kids in a way where they are just loving and kind and accepting of
Yeah.
people, like why do we have to push all these other
It also
things?
waters down the reality that racism exists. There are people out there that don't like people because of their religion, the color of their skin, their gender, their LGBTQ status. Like there are people who genuinely hate on those metrics. And if you're going to say that everyone is racist, well, then how do I find the actual racist that I want to like point out and say that's a bad mentality, that's a bad way to think? But if everyone is, which is what's said by like Robin DiAngelo, everyone is. I had that. I don't know if you saw like the pretty like it went like viral with like 3 critical race theory educators.
Oh,
I'll have to send it to you. It's something. And one of them was like a consultant about like anti-racism. She was so aiming to trying to shame me for asking questions. And it was everything was just like, well, you're a cis het white male, so you don't have a say about this, 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 and this. It was so rude.
yeah.
I was taking it in stride because I was just genuinely curious. But a 10th grader or something like that is not going to take that very well. They're going to feel terrible. And I get all these stories through my Instagram of like people who their kids come home like, I guess I'm a really bad person because of the color of my skin. And there's an element, like you said, of like, well, boo hoo, because that's the way it's been for us for so long. And I kind of get that. I actually try to understand that. I kind of do get some element of that, of like, it's going to be unfair in certain situations towards people who've had a lot of the attention and like, I guess like paved roads before. You got to kind of eat a little bit of crap. But that shouldn't be the aim. Like, it shouldn't be okay. It should just be kind of like par for the course and just kind of like the residual damage of this sometimes. But I feel like there's like an aim to try and intentionally make certain people feel bad because of their skin color and stuff like that.
Feel better.
How could
Like
it, right?
when you make somebody feel, nobody can tell me that it truly makes you feel better as a human being. And the other thing I tell people, I'm like, I'm not oppressed. Do not look at me and think because I have black skin that I identify as a person who is oppressed. I've never one day in my whole life thought I was oppressed. So for somebody to put that on me, and I think that's the problem with the messages that are being you know, spoken out and projected onto people like you're oppressed, you're oppressed. If somebody tells you you're oppressed enough, yeah, of course you're gonna feel oppressed. And so the messages that are out there, I think people need to push back on them. And I love when I do see people of color say, stop saying that about me or stop putting these ideas on me that are not true. And I've had like, as I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so at one point, Milwaukee was known as the #1 most segregated city in the United States. So I have had times where I've walked into a store in like a suburban community and have been followed around. Is that gonna taint my heart toward every white person? Like, no, that person just was maybe being a jerk or something, or
Yeah.
had a wrong perception. But that does not mean every time I've gone into the store, I haven't been followed around. If it's happened 2 or 3 times in my life out of the thousands of times, I'm not gonna build a narrative around that. And I think that's what I try to help people understand is like the more you accept kind of this garbage that is being put out on you and just making you feel down and like everybody's out to get you, everybody wants to hurt you. I'm like, I've had no problem getting to where I am in my life. As far as me going the odds were stacked against me for my, being having a 17-year-old mom. Yes,
Yeah.
I should be where I am right now, but nothing was stopping me. And so I never, even with my own children, I never want them to think that any person has that much power over them to stop them from being who they were created to be. My daughter she's 14, she wants to go to law school. I'm like, all right. So we talk about it all the time. There's never okay, well, we hope you get into this school. We hope that these people don't, do this and that. I'm not building a narrative for her about that. It's like, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to be, you can do it. And so sometimes I do get people, even people of color, who get so angry at me
Oh, yeah.
because I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm not joining on the parade there because it's
Yeah.
not true. And people, even with the media, like sometimes choosing clips of things and then showing it and building this whole story. Like what was actually happening? Like give me some more context. But I think because the emotional reaction that comes out of people when you see something that right away you might identify as wrong, I think that's what media has done to people.
Mhm.
And then people then, whether it's protesting or just whatever may happen, or, whatever people choose to do to show their displeasure with that, comes out. And often it comes out in a way that hurts other people. And I'm often like, what are the facts? Like, what really happened? Maybe get to that. But that emotional response is sometimes the first thing that happens.
Actually, I'm going to pull on this thread a little bit. I think
Mhm.
there's something so valuable here. I had Pamela Garfield on like 2 or 3 episodes ago. She's a social worker and a teenage therapist. And she was at this like conference, basically, this training. And they said one of the things that they were promoting, like hardcore in social work, is make sure these kids know that they're oppressed. And she told me the story. And I was like, wait, what? Make sure they know? Like teenagers know when they've been dealt a bad hand in life. You didn't need to like think about, oh, I was born into, I was in foster care and stuff like that. Oh, that puts me at a disadvantage. Really? Like, no, sorry, my language, like, no shit. Like, I know, but how is that going to benefit you? So how did you arrive at this? This is something that is very disruptive, and a lot of people can get really mad at you, say, like, oh, you're naive or whatever it is. Like, how did you arrive at that, Myesha? It's really valuable. I look at all of these kids who are in really tough situations. You were in a tough situation, and the mentality of that's not going to stop me is what gets them out. My wife was not dealt a great hand, coming here. She was an ESL person and she, Filipino immigrant, didn't have any money and stuff like that. But she was told her whole life, oh, you're gonna just kill it. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna crush it. And that's the way you are. Just work hard and no one can stop you. And she was like, oh, okay. And that was her framing. That's the way she saw the world. How did you get this way?
Yeah. And I was going to say exactly what happened with your wife. I didn't have anyone telling me I was oppressed. I didn't have anyone saying I can't do something. I had no one telling me that there were going to be any barriers in my life. So then I didn't expect it. That's why I feel like language is so powerful. Like what you speak over a person and constantly, just kind of projecting on them. I think you are trying to direct their path with your words, and whether or not people will take responsibility for that, it's the truth. And because I didn't have anyone saying that, I thought the sky was the limit. I just did. And that's why I think my perspective then with the approach I take to equity is like, well, nobody ever told me I was oppressed. I've never felt oppressed. So then why am I gonna go out and tell people that people are oppressing them? Like I wouldn't do that. And so I think that's a number one thing. And I also think being very aware of what you're consuming. So even with social media, I'm very careful about who I will listen to because
Mhm.
I do believe that sometimes you can listen to something and the way in which somebody articulates their thoughts or their views, you can buy into it. And so I then have to just really be careful. and make sure that I'm listening to a variety of, sources. And when I started doing my equity work, people would always ask me, like, who is your work based on?
Mhm.
It's like, well, I'm not trying to sound like I know it all because I don't,
Right.
but it's not based on anyone's work because I have lived out an equitable life through my teaching. I really sought to be fair toward all students, and I was a model for that for other people. I feel like in life, if I'm at a restaurant and somebody was before me, I'm not going to jump ahead of them, right? So that's to me being fair. That's treating them
Yeah.
equitably. And I just think to myself, like I've lived a life where I practice what I preach. And so that's where my message comes from. Yes, sometimes I do, like I read articles or books or sometimes just even parts of them to kind of see what else is out there. But I really am particular about what I consume for that
Yeah.
reason. So
I mean, how would you, I'm just trying to like steel man, like the people who would undoubtedly say like, you're wrong, Myesha, you're wrong. Like as a Black woman, there've got to be situations that have been in your past and that will occur where you are viewed as less than by certain people, right?
mhm,
There has to be. I mean,
yeah.
one of my wife's friends, she has a salon in Arkansas, and it's like rural Arkansas. And she said she can't put her image, she's a dark skinned Black woman, so you can't put her face on her advertisements because it's like, just like it's Southern, like racism down there. And she just like can't do it. So she doesn't seem to like really let it down, like bring her down, but she realizes that that kind of discrimination is very real, at least in her kind of neck of the woods. So how do you deal with the overt racism that is still going to be out there? And even, I mean, it's like a double thing, and even the reality that there is past oppression. I mean, the reason why Kimberly Crenshaw started her intersectionality stuff is because like Black men were allowed, I think it was like Ford or General Motors or something.
Mhm.
Black men were allowed to work on the factory floor, and white women were allowed to work as secretaries, which left Black women from like, they can't work at this place. So those kinds of things from the past, and then all the obviously like redlining and discrimination, like formal systemic discrimination, there are ripple effects in the current day. Those are kind of the go-to arguments that people have against what you're saying, which is you can't stop me from getting in my way. Is it still that? Is it like, yeah, there are hurdles in front of me, but like I can still jump them?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I feel like that message is very true for me as a Black woman. You would think that more people would reach out to me to talk about equity, right? Because like, oh, good, I fit kind of the picture of what people want when they
Yeah,
want a voice.
right.
However, I don't really get as many opportunities because my message is different. So it's not racism, but there's something else,
Yeah.
that is like, oh, yeah, you fit by being a woman and you're Black, so you fit that criteria, but your message doesn't fit the woke narrative, so you're not giving the opportunity. So in that way, I do feel like, in a sense, I don't know, discriminated.
Yeah.
It's kind of left out the conversation. So most of the time when I'm having these conversations with the people who have listened to me, I'm like, okay, I want to help get a message out there that really will help us steer us in the right direction. Other times, I don't know if I shared this with you before, I was at a grocery store not too long ago here in California and was just running back to get something. My best friend was in line and I was like, oh, I'm gonna run back. And we were making like subs and stuff for a big group of people.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, we're at the line, we're checking out. I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough buns. I'll run back and get some. So I ran over to the deli. And as I'm running back to the checkout line, which I feel like most people have like run back to get something and run back to the line, a lady at the deli starts shouting. She's like, "Ma'am, ma'am, ma'am!" And I stopped and I turned around and was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Oh, I just wanted to make sure you were going to pay for that." And I said, "But what made you think I wasn't going to?"
Mhm.
Because I can't imagine
Yeah.
that I'm the only person that runs in the store, has run back to
Yeah.
and I can't imagine she calls every person that she sees.
Uh-huh.
So in that moment, I could have taken like it's gotten super offended.
Of
But what I
course.
did is I talked to the manager and I said, hey, this is what happened, and this is what I would love to see happen. I would love maybe you to start a conversation with her and ask her some questions to make her reflect, like, what made you call her
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Because I said that is going to be to me more important. Her kind of processing and thinking through her actions and any kind of like her being reprimanded for that,
Yeah.
like don't do that. Okay, now that know what would happen, but I said have a conversation with her with some guiding questions, just some make her think about why she did what she did, because then that might help her to understand like what she might think about me. Did she stop me because I look young? Did she stop me because I'm a woman? Did she stop me because I'm black? Like, what was her
Yeah.
reasoning for calling me out? Because she probably doesn't do that. And then let that lead to a conversation about like how we think about the customers that we're serving. And so to me, the manager saying, that's a great idea. Absolutely. I'm going to do that was enough for me. Like I didn't need anything
Right.
else because I felt like that could be a teachable moment for this young lady. And that would do more good in the future than me acting crazy over this
Yeah.
situation. That was
Right.
unfair. People
Absolutely.
embarrassed,
For sure.
for that. And then I've had times where I interviewed for a job and was overlooked for it. And I know I should have gotten this
Mhm.
job. And somebody sitting in that interview kind of went to the person who was doing the hiring and said, I really think that you guys made it wrong choice by not, hiring Myesha Reynolds, and here's why. And at the time, I was the only person of color being
Mhm.
interviewed, and even, with the qualifications for this job. And so they didn't pick me, but when someone went on my behalf, the lady said she couldn't sleep that night and she really kept thinking about like, I really do think Myesha fits. Like what made us not select her? So somebody
Yeah.
spoke up and advocated for me. And then like a couple days later, they called and gave me the job. I didn't know all this stuff happened in the middle. I just thought like, oh great. Like they chose me. I'm
Yeah.
qualified. But then I
Yeah.
found out later kind of backstory that I needed somebody to advocate for me and to help show my prove that I was the best person for the job. Now, did that leave me bitter and angry and not causing me to do my job? No, because I felt like it gave me
Yeah.
opportunity to be in, to be a voice, to be around the students and teachers that I wanted to be around and teach and train. And so it was a win-win, even
Yeah.
though I felt like I could have gone to a place of like bitterness or anger or being upset or called out for the race card. Like they didn't hire me because I was a black woman.
Right. Or like for the girl at the deli is the judgment element is it would be very easy, whether it's the manager or you or whatever, to basically say like, you are a bad person for saying this to me as a black woman. And then she feels tremendous shame. And then she feels terrible about herself. And she won't actually probably be able to look into it as much. And she'll just spiral off into I'm a terrible person or whatever. And I think there's like an aim of a lot of the whatever, I don't like using the word, but it's fine. Like with the woke people thinking that shame will get you to change your tune, but it doesn't. And I think that if you say like actually think about why it is that you do, and it's okay for you to just do that and feel like that's what like a safe space should be. It shouldn't be from safe from alternative ideas. It should be safe from judgment because we're all here and we're all screwing up and it's sloppy and relationships are messy and we are all flawed. So let's just have some grace. I love that term grace. I think just have grace with one another. Say like what you did was messed up and it's okay. So let's try and not be messed up in the future. I think that like because a lot of white people, like I'm like a whatever cis het white man, but like I talk about a lot of race issues, and a lot of people like private can't believe you talk about race issues and stuff like that. You're gonna challenge like the perspective, something that challenge perspective of someone who's like a black trans man or woman or whatever it is. It's like, how can you do that? It's like because I see them as my equal. So what? I can't challenge you. I can't question you. What do you mean? Like I thought that's why we're here. I see you as a person, and I'm a person, and want to try and work out ideas. I think a lot of people like white people, especially like liberal white people, are terrified to ever like question it, second guess it. Like I think you and I probably align on a lot of this stuff, but even if we didn't, I would do take the same approach of just like if we didn't align, I would ask questions. Like, please bring me in, help me understand this. And I just think that is a really important thing that's missing. The other thing you mentioned about hiring, though, that's interesting is my wife has a business where she hires people a lot, and one of the red flags is when people are deep into this woke stuff. Because and I was thinking about why that is, because she's hired a bunch of people, and mostly like white people, but it could be anything, it could be across the racial spectrum. But when they are aligned with a lot of that woke stuff, what it is by definition you're looking for problems by definition. So if you're hired, you're going to be looking for problems with the company and ways you're treated poorly and ways that things are against you. And that's just going to be more and more complaints to, my wife and her CFO and COO and stuff like that. It's just like these massive headaches of everyone pointing out everything that's wrong, as opposed to taking the approach of like, even if this is bad, like I'm gonna go do my job really, really well.
Mhm.
And that's so it's not only is it setting kids up for failure in like making them feel like they can't achieve, but it's also setting them up for failure to just be what I see as like very difficult to hire and keep a job. They become a headache for a lot of people and companies. And you're bringing in these like the most like equity consultants to come in and get people to now look for more problems. How is that going to be good for your business? The streamlining and being efficient as a business, it's bad. As opposed to your approach, which is like, how do we get people to feel like comfortable and then do their job better? It just seems like a bad approach, just top to bottom.
Right. It does. And even the companies that I've worked for, my approach is always, let's think about and always keep in mind like the company, and we're working with like real people, right?
Yeah.
Humans. And like I think so much of that has been lost where when people come in with these ways and these ideas and it's just like executed, do this, do that. And I'm like, well, you're working with human beings. And I feel like so much of it has been lost with a lot of the equity and a lot of the equity presentations. So for example, someone came to watch a workshop for me and that I had done. And afterwards he walked up to me, he said, I had an equity training and the people, the two presenters, doctorate degrees, he said they were presenting in a way that was very dehumanizing. And so there are people who were crying, people who were screaming at each other, writing messages over chat that were mean, over Zoom, hanging up the Zoom, because some people were in person, some people were virtual. But he said it was awful. And I think this is why this is not okay, because we're all human beings. And I tell people, like, right away, if you didn't like me or I didn't like, or if you didn't like me, I could say, oh, it's because I'm Black.
Yeah.
What about it's because I have a bad attitude? What about it's because I don't have good morals? What about if it's I'm a liar? You know what I mean? Like everything else is off the table when you're a different race. It's like if we don't see eye to eye and we don't click, it's a race thing. And it's not. And I'm like, we spend so much time, we're so distracted with all of this stuff, particularly when we talk about, with equity and it's so tied to racism, that there's some real issues going on that all of us can be a part of the solution to
Yeah.
solving. But no, we're so caught up in this stuff. And that it just makes me so mad because I feel like I see the potential in human beings to be problem solvers
Yeah.
in the right way that will make things better for everybody. But this stuff is just keeping us so distracted.
Michelle Obama said something like that. She said that she was stupid black. Not a Buddhist. But Michelle Obama said something like that, where she was at like a deli or something, and she was just like in like a hoodie or something, or had sunglasses on with her girls, and a guy, she's like, a white man just butted in front of me because he didn't know that I was the first lady, but that's just the way white or Black women are treated by white men. It's like, maybe he's just an a-hole. Like maybe he just butts in front of, like, you can't say that that's not the way that social science works. And I think of like, me as a social scientist, it's like, that's crazy. But you can't question that, or someone who looks like me can't question that. I brought up the Dr. Sheena Mason on my podcast. She's really awesome. She had like a theory of racelessness, an interesting thing. But I said, you can say the stuff that you're saying, but when I say it, then it's a problem. She's like, I don't know. She's like, because she's a Black woman, she's a lesbian, like all this stuff. She's like, fits those criteria or whatever. But she's like, I am more the enemy because I'm like a traitor. Like everyone always assumes that I'm the bad guy when these race culture wars. But like when, so how do you isolate yourself from that negativity? The negativity of like the weird like race, woman, traitor stuff that, as much as you can rationalize and say like that is absurd, and that as like a smart, cognizant human being, like that's not the way it is, it still hurts, right? It still sucks. Like, so how do you cope with that? Because if we're trying to get people out of this kind of thinking that is very damaging for them to thrive and spread their wings, they're gonna deal with that kind of opposition. And just any kind of advice that you have for those people who are like willing to finally branch out and say, no, I'm not oppressed. How do you deal with that? Because it's gotta hurt.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's so important that I like know who I am and like know what I'm so solid on what I believe.
How did you get there?
Well, I grew up, and it's so much of my faith, like the way I grew up, and just really knowing that and believing that people were all created equal. People all are valuable, every single human being. is valuable. Every person has purpose, and just being rooted in that, I think, has helped me as a person. One, with how I think of myself, but then also how I think about other people.
Yeah.
So there have been times where somebody actually that I have had done Instagram lives with and had lots of great conversations, recently left me a message over like a voice memo over Instagram saying, I really think you need to stop using for equity. Conservatives are not going to like that. And it just really speaks this message, even though what you say, it seems like you mean well, but that's not really what you're communicating. And so right away, I was a little taken aback because I was like, we've had so many conversations, and I'm really trying to push back on what other people are saying equity
Yeah, you're trying to
is.
reclaim it.
Reclaim
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And I said, in my Instagram and Facebook, like, I'm like, I put messages on there that I really try to get to people's heart, because I do feel like equity, like, really is a work of the heart.
Yeah.
Like, when you have a heart and you're like, no, like, some change really needs to happen. Like, no, it's not okay that some people are treated wrong. It's not okay to bring shame and condemnation on people. I think that's where some true change happens. And so I just was a little taken aback, but then I responded to that person. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry that you think that. Like, I thought you knew where I stood on this, and, kind of shared my heart. But then she left me another message that I chose not to listen to,
Mhm.
because in that moment, I had to recognize that we just disagree.
Mm.
I know who I am, and I know the message that I am to present, and the types of trainings that I do, what I believe. And so I just chose that in that moment. My heart, I didn't want to have any kind of like ill feeling toward her, or any, I don't know, just any wrong thoughts. So I was
Yeah.
like, just like, let's do it. Like, I
Yeah.
think I got the gist of it from the first message, and I'm just not going to play the second one. It was like a long 7-minute message, but I just chose not to, because I feel like I have to just kind of guard my mind and my heart against the things that come at me. I know as I continue to speak more, people will say things. I've been in rooms where people roll their eyes at me when I say, like, hey, it's not okay, that we treat white people any different than black people or Hispanic people or Asian people. And I've had people in interviews of well-meaning people who are like, we want to promote you. And I say one thing that they're like, well, there have been times in this country where some people haven't been treated fairly. And what I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, I'm not saying that, but I'm also saying, like, why are we going to pull the negativity and the wrong from the past and bring it right up into our future? Like, hey, come here, segregation, let me find you and bring you with me into the future. It's like, no, leave it back there. And let's move forward so that we are not living that type of life. Like, even I was reading an article, which you probably are aware of too, that there's so many colleges who are building dorms for certain groups of
Yeah.
people. I'm like, why would we
Black
ever
only
do
dorms
that?
and stuff.
Black only, Hispanic only,
Yeah.
Asian only.
Yeah.
I'm like, what in the world? Like, just thinking of the people who have just during the civil rights movement, and people have really wanted us to be able to live together in unity. And now we're getting to a place where we say we're more safe if we're apart and with just people that look like us. I'm like, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And when I say things like, there's some people who say, well, people need to feel safe. I say, well, then that's an idea. Like, what's making you not feel like? Why aren't you
Yeah.
feeling safe?
Yeah.
Like, let's unpack that a little bit then. And is this an idea that you're not safe, or is it the reality that you're not safe?
Wow. Yeah, it's such a heavy topic, Myesha. I don't really know like what to do, but I know that it's not good for young people to get this message, and they're getting it over and over and over again. Because I have friends that are teachers, and if they fail a kid, they fail, like, let's just say like a black girl or something like that, they immediately they go, you failed me because I'm black. And then it's like, okay, well then when you make that claim, that's a big claim. So then you got to go in front of the board and you got to like show the proof of what A paper is, B paper, whatever it is. But that's not, then they're going to focus on that and not focus on what could I do to be a better writer. And it's like, it's just, we're kneecapping all of these kids. And yeah, so there is an achievement gap. And yeah, there are inequities. So yeah, if there are hurdles in front of certain groups of people, then what we have to do is get them to be able to jump hurdles.
Yeah.
You don't like, you can get rid of the hurdles too, but like if they're behind it, you got to get them strong legs. And if there are, I guess I think about it often, like if there are like obstacles in front of you, you get better because of those obstacles.
Yes.
You've had obstacles in your life, the way that you grew up, like that probably made you a stronger, better person. You don't wish those for people, but people are going to have them. And if you can frame it as these bad things have happened in your life, for you to become a stronger, better, more equipped person, that's a great narrative for young people who are put in bad situations, as opposed to you were put in this bad situation, the world is out to get you, no one wants you to succeed. I mean, that kind of message is being thrown all the time. And then if you push back on it at all, then you're just like a right winger, like weird Republican, nothing against Republicans, like, but like you're viewed as like a bad person, and it just seems so like not the way to do it. I don't know where to go from here and how to do it. I guess that's
Well,
where you
some people it's hard to come and tell me it's equity, but I need them to hear you talk about equity because the world is telling them equity is something so different. And so one person in particular is an Asian young man, but I'm holding a symposium on October 1st, and his dad was like, there are a lot of things that he won't listen to me about, but because he loves equity, he wants to come to this
okay.
symposium. And so I was like, yes, bring them, because the more young people that, and I even like have another group, a pastor that like a youth leader who came and talked to me, and I said, bring your group. Like the more I can bring these young people to hear a message that is different and make it make sense for them, hopefully their eyes can be open to say, yeah, there's something wrong with, X, Y, and Z that I've been taught at school or that I'm seeing on social media or the TikTok video I watch, and then can make some decisions based around having more than one perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think they're given one perspective in schools and through the media, where if they don't have another voice, whether it's from a parent or from a person who's speaking rightly or truthfully about issues like equity, then I think they're only going to be able to go one way if they don't have another voice. And so that excites me because I know how just influential these young people will be. And if we don't really kind of address these things now, like I can't even imagine where our world is going. And I sometimes I feel like I'm like, we're making like our almost adult children into to think like infants, just because we're saying like how we want to cuddle you and I like snuggle you and all that stuff. It's like, no, like stand up for things. Like, no, go get a job. And if you are late and your boss says something to you, you should have had something said to you because you shouldn't be late. Those things are being lost and like they can't be. Otherwise, our society is doomed.
When you saw like at the African American History Museum that in the DC Mall, they had that thing of. Do you see that thing of like elements of like of white supremacy or like showing up on time, stuff like that? It's unbelievable. Yeah. That's like verbatim what like someone in the KKK would say. Like being responsible and taking care of your family is what white people do. That's a white thing. It's unbelievable.
I not even believe it. I was like, this cannot be real. And then I started like reading some other articles.
It was real.
Yeah. Yeah. I was dumbfounded. And sometimes I was these things wow. And I think, if more of us push back on things together, because sometimes I know I'm not, but sometimes I feel like a Lone Ranger, I'm just like, oh my gosh, can somebody join me in this movement of saying like, no more. We're not talking about race, equity in a way that's divisive and hateful and wrong, but we're going to join you. And I do have people who will personally message me kind of like with you and say like, I love what you're doing this great job. I'm like, well, can you speak up too about this? And say what you think. But I think people are afraid. There's so much fear of like being ostracized, fear of being rejected, fear of being called out, fear of being canceled, whatever, that it just keeps people quiet. But I'm like, but if we can tell and see what happens when many voices come together. That's why we have the things that we have, the narrative that we have that's being pushed is because lots of people are pushing that narrative. Yeah. So if we can change it, it's going to take lots of people to help change it. And so I'm often asking people like, come join me on this movement and help be a voice, be okay with standing up for right and saying, no, that's not okay. I was speaking to a ladies group and I said how I was just looking at some chamber of commerces to join. And I saw one of them was like $400 for the year. But if you were a person of color, it's $100. Yeah. And I became very offended because I was like, well, number one, are you saying that because I'm a person of color, I can't afford a $400? Because then, okay, I'm oppressed. So I don't have as much money. Obviously, I must not have a thriving business. But the flip side of that made me upset was I have friends who are white, who are single parents starting a business. They need $100 break. A chamber of commerce can help grow your business. So why can't they also pay the $100 if they need to? So to me, an equitable thing to do would be all right, we have, this is a constable, we have 20 memberships a year that are $100, answer these two or three questions, and then we'll pick from, don't include race on that, but like who needs this? Who can we help? That would be the fair thing to do, not to decide white versus non-white, $400, $100.
Yeah.
And I think, but more people have to speak up and say, like, that's not okay. I can't look at that and say, oh, good, that's my advantage, more money in my pocket. No, that's not fair. It's not fair, even though it could help me and keep, save me money and I could get it to be part of the commerce. It's still not fair for everyone. So
Yeah.
I should not be in agreement with that. And I would say equity needs to be defended. And when I say defended, I mean like upheld, like
Mhm.
true equity, like true fairness for all people.
I think about like the concept of reparations never really made sense when it was just like along racial lines, because it was kind of like, well, how does that work? Like if William Lloyd Garrison, like one of the top abolitionists, his descendants were poor, let's say, okay, they're like, poor white people. And then there was like, like black slave owners, because there were black slave owners and their descendants, and okay, are super rich. Maybe it's Oprah or some, so like the extremes. Does William Lloyd Garrison's descendants have to pay Oprah? Like, how does this work? So then I looked in like stuff like Sandy Darity at Duke had these ideas of like baby bonds. So if you're born into poverty, you get like a lump sum of money and it matures in the market. And when you're 18, you get it. So that gives some buy-in for kids to, take literacy, financial literacy classes and stuff. But one of the things that he's advocated for, and I think Coleman Hughes has talked about this too, is you do it based on wealth. Because if you say that a lot of systemic racism is things that disproportionately negatively affect the Black community, it affects poor whites too, but it affects more Black people because they're in those more financial hardships, like when you're looking at the big grand scale. Then if you do the same application for the solution, yeah, you will help out poor white people, but you will also disproportionately help out poor Black people who are overrepresented. Does that make sense? So like this idea, if you're going to do some sort of reparations, to say like, well, you can't do it this way because you're going to be helping out poor white people. It's like, yeah, but you're also going to be helping out poor Black people who are disproportionately put in that situation. Because you can look at like the net worth of, I think it was in Boston, they did something like the net worth of like the average white family compared to Black family, and it was like $80,000 compared to like $8 or something like really crazy. So you say like, well, but there's also a lot of poor white people too. So why not do these applications and you will rise all ships, but certain ships will be risen up faster, which would be these marginalized communities. Like, why is that not a better solution? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm all for
Yeah.
helping all of us. I just like together, I win, you win, we all win.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that so much of our culture is not like that. I feel like we are very self-absorbed. And because we don't really, I don't know, maybe value one another equally.
Do you think it's a power grab? Do you think that there's an element here that you know this too, if you wanted to play the woke card and do that kind of thing and get angry and get pissed off and say everything that I say to you, if I say like nice earrings or something like that, and you take that as like get really angry, maybe even you like frame your mind, you actually get angry about that kind of stuff, you would probably benefit. There is a power that you hold as a Black woman to be able to make a lot of people, white men, feel terrible. That's a power that you have. Maybe not like an insensitive asshole white guy, but like most like kind people, and I think a lot of people are kind and do mean well and aren't racist. So, but you have that power over people if you want to. You have that like card to always play. And I think there's a lot of people, and young people are starting to recognize that, wow, I can play that card. It's a feeling of like, I can be powerful. I can make you the guy, like people look like me have been like bad throughout history in a lot of ways sometimes. So like, I can take you down a notch, and you can. And I think they know that. So it feels that way to me that a lot of people are doing these like attacking equity things of like bringing white people down. It is like, it feels like a power grab in a really ugly way, the same way that we got to a lot of the actual systemic racist policies before of power grabs. I want to take power away from those people and put it toward me. It feels the same way.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about, power. We can use in every situation, at some point, you have some form of power, right? You
Mhm.
know, like a toddler knows if they scream loud enough and have a
Mhm.
tantrum, they're probably going to get what they want, right? That type of power there. And but we can use our power, no matter how big or how small, for good. But I think it's a choice that you have to make, and sometimes that choice, use your power for good, may not make you feel as though you're powerful
Yeah.
or as though you are, valued, or that you're entitled, or whatever there may be. And I think that's a process and a choice that people have to make. But I think so much of the power right now is being given to people for negative, and negative
Yeah.
or wrong agendas, and that's not okay. And it's just sending, it's like a sinking ship, I feel, in this, especially in this country. And I it's actually pretty heartbreaking to me, and which is why, like, I often have these conversations with people just about equity and kind of where we're headed if we keep doing things
Yeah.
this way. If we keep talking about this way. I'm like, we may think we're getting somewhere, but if you look at the superficial solutions, I feel, and I call them superficial because I'm like, they don't last long. They're often rooted in hate, which may cause some people, really good people, to leave companies who really could be there to help that
Yeah.
company thrive. So
Yeah.
then that company may not do as well because some people have been pushed out because of the types of things that are being put in place. So I'm like, it's not sending us down the right path. And so many people are hurt, so many businesses are being hurt, schools are being hurt, like all around. And in this nation, we are being wrongly affected by the DEI agendas that are being projected, and just being, yeah.
This guy did an Instagram live with this wild dude, kind of like a conservative black guy with like dreads, and he calls himself Hotep Jesus. Thing dude, but he went into a Starbucks. He did this. That's how he got kind of some like viral fame. He went into Starbucks and he's like, "Hey, they're giving black people free coffees today. Like it's a reparations thing." And she's like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Where's my free coffee? Because you guys enslaved me." It's just like, and they're like, "Oh yeah, right away, sir." And they gave him free coffee, and like you can play that card with a lot of soft-hearted people. Say, "Give me your thing," blah blah blah. Like, and they're like, "Give me your shoes off your feet." Yeah, here you go. Sorry, but like that like element, that's way too powerful to not push back on. And it's like, how far can I take this? And people are people, and especially young people, like they're just trying to like figure out where they are in the world. Like, oh, I can get stuff to help me out just by playing this game. They're gonna do it. Teenagers are like velociraptors in Jurassic Park, testing defenses all the time. What can I get away with? And this is just blatant in front of them, like, oh, you can get away with a lot. Just
Yeah.
keep pushing it. And then out of like this long generational guilt that we're supposed to feel, okay, then I will do all these things. And trying to not do that, I think is tough. It kind of goes against some level of like your intuitive nature of like, hey, do what you got to do to survive, especially if you're a person who was raised in a situation that was a lot about survival, which a lot of kids are.
Yeah. Wow.
Tough.
It is. And I do think that I see things like the need for places in our community where our kids can go if they're not receiving like some of the advantages or experiences that other people have, that we can put money into those types of
Mhm.
programs and services to really help build the just kids their own sense of value and purpose and worth, where I feel like if that's built up in them, they're not going to assume they're entitled or people have to give them something. They
Yeah.
will know that they have the ability to create or get what they need on because they can do it. And so I feel like so many kids are so consumed with, video games, social media, because they're boredom or just not being plugged into other activities. Like, I often ask people and kind of beg people, even within my own family, I'll say, hey, they have the best shoes on. I mean, their whole body could be covered, $200 shoes, $100 jeans, a really nice, $50 shirt,
Yeah.
but they don't take any kind of lesson, like, instrument lessons, or know how to swim, or,
Mm.
just
Yeah.
invest in classes in
Right.
the arts or anything, where I would try to say, even to my family, was like, hey, why don't you like use some of that money to maybe put them in these other things that really, so they can
Make them a
discover.
better person, better version of themselves. Yeah. Yeah.
That's important.
Mm.
And so it was important though what people thought about you and how you looked on the outside, which I
Yeah.
often see with people who are in poverty, kind of that mentality. I can look good on the outside, But what's on the inside can be just as dry and empty. And I think that a lot of kids really do need a place and an area of focus, you know? And I think that just does so much for you and for your drive as a human when you actually are learning and growing and developing in different areas. And that's something that I feel like if we, when people talk about reparations, it's like, hey, well, how about, investing that money in education or
Mhm.
resources that will help teach young people that they can create the kind of world that they want by their
Yeah.
own efforts and abilities that they have within them, not just a handout because then if they're not taught like money management or whatever, that's all going to be wasted, or taught how to invest so that you can leave, something for future generations, or build your own homes and grow your own crops. If they're not taught how to do those things, then they're not going to do them when they could have if they were given thousands or millions of
Yeah.
dollars.
Yeah. I really love what you're doing, and I hope that it grows. Um, People can just like check out like on the website. I'm gonna tag all your stuff in the podcast and everything on YouTube and everything like that. Are you, if it does, and like, and you grow, are you kind of like just like prepared for the pushback? Because I mean, essentially there's a finite amount of gigs,
Mhm.
right? And there's all these different equity consultants, and you are something different. They're all kind of doing similar things, and you are a disruptor. You're a disruptor, and I think that you are doing. Look, I would love to talk to them. They don't want to talk to me. So I bring you in here, and I'm just like aligned with you on so many things. But that just tends to be what happens in my podcast, because they're willing to talk to me. I would love to talk with people that I disagree with on everything, but I think it's like almost like too hard for some people just to like answer some of these basic questions that I have. But the I hope that I think that what you're doing is the inevitable future. What's going on right now can't last. We will pull apart at the seams. We
Yeah.
will kill each other, and I hope that we don't. So it's so divisive. Oh, and I did this podcast with over here with Noelle Maring, that book. Yeah, it's really good. And one of the things that she says as the book, but one of the things she says in there is she breaks down the word of the devil like broken down in like the Latin where it comes from, or Greek or whatever, and it's like basically means to divide. So much to throw apart, diablos or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, like so much of what we're doing is, I mean, just as like a religious person, I'm like, that's evil. That's the devil. That's dividing human beings. And so much is that we can't last doing this. So you are on the forefront of doing what is going to be done eventually, but you're just like kind of the tip of the spear. So you get a lot of the negativity right now that in 5 years, I hope it'll be like, can't believe we were doing that back in the early 2020s. Like we were nuts, and you're steering us out of it. But you kind of being at the forefront, I think you're going to probably like meet some of that resistance. If they will even engage with you, it'll probably be in a very negative way. And it sucks, but I think that, I think you're able to handle it.
Mhm.
But like, you don't like that conflict, right? Like it's just,
No, but it's interesting because when I do get the conflict, I don't feel conflict. I don't feel like I cave under the pressure of it. I think I'm just still like very matter of fact because I'm like, well, this is what I believe. Like this is
yeah,
what I believe is right. Like I don't, and I, for most people, I'm like, keep really tell me that I'm wrong. Like, prove to me that I'm wrong, that
yeah,
we should actually consider all people. Like,
yeah.
how could you ever, what argument could you ever come up with that will actually be able to stand up to what I'm saying? And oftentimes it's people's opinion or their stories or whatever. I'm like, I have opinion, I have stories too, but I
Mhm.
also have what I feel is the truth, you know? And
Yeah.
the truth is we're not going to get anywhere as a people group, as a society, if we are deciding that some people are better than others. Like, that's why we kind of are where we are right now, even though I feel like the pendulum has swung the other way, but it's because people got tired of some
Mhm.
people being left out of the party, right?
Yeah.
And so we all understand that that's not okay, but the way in which we go about it should be a way that is still inclusive. And I'm not using inclusive in the woke way, but
Yeah.
just includes all people, where we
Mhm.
all just all have something to bring to the table. And so um, I just feel like I do get the pushback. I do have people who may, speak out against me, or who, will write me things over Instagram. And just recently somebody said, a guy who I don't even know him. He asked me a question and he said, "Why don't you just use equality? Stop using equity then." And I was like, I think the word just rubs people the wrong
It
way because
does.
of what's happened with it.
Yeah.
That I'm just like, but if you listen to me for 5 minutes, you will see that I am not what you've heard before. And so sometimes I get that. I don't, most of the like workshops and talks that I do are from people who know me, who have had heart conversations with me, or who have maybe had lunch with me or something. And
Yeah.
they're like, wow, we really need to talk about equity this way. And that's how I get invited. But oftentimes when I'm trying to get like other like gigs or jobs from larger companies, I don't fit the narrative. I don't fit
Yeah.
what they're looking for. I don't fit what is other DEI people are saying and doing. So sometimes I don't have those opportunities, but it's okay.
Yeah, but it's a misstep on their end because what if they bring in they bring in the cockroaches, the exterminators? It's not going to fix anything. It's not going to be positive at all. At best, it'll be nothing. A lot of people just roll their eyes. They're playing games while they're going through these DI things. Like it's not that. Maybe it's because Kamala Harris had that commercial. Do you see that? Like equity means that we all end up in the same place at the end. So a lot of people associate it with like socialism or communism, where it's just like taking the high achievers and just ripping them down, as opposed to just giving people as close to an even playing field. You still want the high achiever. You just want to see there are high achievers that are down here. The people who are seen as the top are not the best and brightest the way it is now. I've seen this teaching private school and public school. The kids who end up at Princeton are not necessarily the best and brightest. There are smarter kids who can only go to community college or have to join the Marines, kicking indoors in Iraq, who are higher horsepower brains that we should have running our institutions. But instead, we get these well-connected people whose grandfathers donated a library 2 generations ago, and they're a legacy, and they just get right in. That's the equity that we're talking about, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about taking someone who's really doing great and ripping them down and saying like, oh, you're achieving too much, we have to bring you down. That's what I think is seen. That's the way I think a lot of people interpret it, and that's not what it really is. It's been kind of co-opted.
Yeah, for a while, it's like people just use the word equity however they want, and it's like this umbrella to just like do anything. Or if you don't agree with me or see things the way I see, then you're being inequitable or unfair.
Yeah.
And I was like, how could we ever stand under that umbrella? You know what I mean? It's just not okay, and it's not going to work. And we have to get back to, I think, just the human, side of things, and thinking about like we are all part of one race, and that's the human race, and not to pit ourselves like one against the other.
Was the where we were at not that long ago.
I always say, I told somebody, I said, so if your house is burning down and a white firefighter show up to get you out, are you going to say, no, give me a black one? Like, no, you would say like, yes, thank you for being here to help me, like, keep me out of here. And so like, where are we going? But I really do hope, like you said, that we can kind of get back to this place.
I think we will. I think it's inevitable. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I hope that when people are like, oh, I got to fill this requirement for DEI training, then they can go, oh, what do I got to do? I think a lot of them just look for like, okay, let's just pick the most BS one so it won't cause more problems, as opposed to doing something to like, that money's there for a lot of these institutions. So send it your way. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching.